In today's episode, I'm going to be walking you through one of the major archetypes that helps you get the strength and the conviction that you need in order to achieve any goal you want in this lifetime. What's going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dave, and in today's episode, I'll be walking you through exactly what you need to really access the warrior archetype, which is the part of the masculine structure, the masculine psyche that gives you the courage to go within and to see the parts of yourself that maybe you've been running from and maybe you've been kind of hiding from. It also gives you the strength to step into the world and with conviction and really take action when you don't feel like it, which is honestly showing up to that workout when you're tired. Or maybe it's making those sales calls when you're like, oh man, I feel like I've made 100 sales calls, and you know you need to take action to get a result. The warrior archetype is most commonly associated with masculinity. Most individuals identify masculinity with the warrior archetype. And a lot of men, especially men who have not tapped into the warrior archetype, or those who feel that the warrior archetype is quote unquote bad, will run away from the warrior. And then in turn, they will feel weak and they'll feel lack of confidence, when in reality, they still need to access the warrior archetype. On the other hand, if most men, and I would say most men, but men in general, will look at the warrior archetype and they'll say, that is masculinity. That's the way. I'm going to go access that, right? And they think about the guys like David Goggins and Jocko Willink and some of these famous veterans that are out there, and they really look upon that as being the essence of masculinity. Well, I will tell you this, it is absolutely an essential part. It's like having a leg on a table. You can't have the table stable without it, but it's not the only leg. You need all four legs in order for the tables to show up. So the four major archetypes of masculinity are those legs. Those are the king archetype, which we talked about in another episode, the warrior archetype, which we'll talk about today, the magician archetype, which we will talk about again in a different episode, and the lover archetype, which for most men is actually terrifying. They don't want to access a lover within because they feel like that's too effeminate. And we'll talk about that in a totally different episode. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the warrior archetype, what it means, how to access it, what the shadow elements of that are, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's dive in. Before we dive into today's episode, I really want to encourage you, if you are looking to access the masculine structures of yourself and you haven't really dove into what that means, I encourage you to check out the unbreakableman.com and access all of the information we have on there regarding the Unbreakable Man experience. And why I want to guide you into that direction is that at that 3-day initiatory rite of passage, I guide you guys through all of the elements you need in order to create clarity, command, and confrontation. I was going to say confront all of the reasons that stop you from achieving the goals you want in life. Now, most men don't think that they need something that will help them break through in life. And I will tell you this, I thought the same thing. I was really depressed for many years and I felt like completely isolated, despondent even. I felt hopeless. And it wasn't until I started to surround myself with other men and I went through a weekend experience that everything completely shifted. And I knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly what I was put on this earth to do. And every day since then, I've been showing up. Now, it's not to say I don't have bad days. Absolutely, I have bad days. But I knew exactly who I am, right? I know why I'm here on this planet. And in fact, this is exactly why I'm having this conversation with you, so that you know what you need in order to show up as the most soul-satisfied, fulfilled, achieved man that you know you can be, right? To get those results that you're really looking for. So when you show up as the man you know you can be, by having taken all of, really looking at all of the reasons that you don't feel fulfilled and unsatisfied and all of these reasons, and really bringing them to the surface and letting them go, and really doing some deep inner work, it will change your life. And when you change your life will obviously change. So check out theunbreakableman.com. You can go access the Unbreakable Man experience, really check out what we have on there for you guys, all the videos, all the testimonials. It is absolutely life-changing. Every man that has ever come through that program has all told me that it's life-changing. And my favorite is when the wives of the men call me crying with joy because they got their husband back. That is my absolute favorite. So check it out. All right, let's dive into today's episode. The warrior archetype. So this is one of the main archetypes that most men look at as masculinity. I mentioned this kind of in the intro as we were, diving into the episode. Masculinity as a thing, right? As a thing is an energy. And the energy of masculinity is really this sort of this encompassing element, or the encompassing elements inside of that are the four major archetypes, which I got from Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette's book called The King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover, which are the four main archetypes. And again, I explained an archetype, but I'll explain it again. An archetype is the psychological structure upon which we access. It's like energy that we can tap into, tune into, and access to give us something that we need in a moment. And I'll give you an example, right? So and I gave this example in a previous episode, so just, flow with me. If you wanted to access being a better basketball player and, like you were growing up in the early 2000s, Kobe Bryant was like really good. Well, you would access Kobe almost like you were channeling Kobe, and then you would go play basketball and you just like kind of felt like it, right? So an archetype is an energy that you can access that gives you something so that you can either achieve a goal or just be the man you want to be in a moment. So the four main archetypes, again, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. There are many other archetypes out there, but when you become conscious to these and you start to use them to your advantage, your life will change because you know exactly when to get the most out of them. So when to access the warrior archetype. When to access the warrior archetype is going to be obviously in war, right? But you're not typically in war at every given second of every given day. Even men that are in war, they don't always have to access the warrior archetype, but it can always be there. When to access this is when you are showing up to something of meaning in life and you need to take action. When you need to take true action from the king within. So that's why the king is so important. The king guides and gives direction and order to the male psyche. And then the warrior creates the energy necessary in order to take action. So it gives you the courage, gives you the energy, gives you the vitality you need. So when you're tired and it's, the middle of the night and you need to make payroll, well, are you going to get up? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do the work? Right? Or when, even in the sense of fathering, right? Fatherhood, when you know your child is maybe your child's sick and you think, and this is such an interesting thing to think about, and you got to stay up all night with your child because if they lay down face up, maybe they got too much snot and they start choking on it. They got to sleep on your chest, and I've been there. You actually are accessing the warrior within because it's giving you the strength you need. And a lot of people think, well, that's not warriorship. Well, absolutely it is, right? What makes it not warriorship? It's simply you accessing the energy of more vitality to be there, courage, the courageousness to show up and feel tired for your child. So warriorship can absolutely show up in the most nurturing moments or when you are out there and battling the enemy, whatever that enemy might look like. So warriorship is really the courage to go within and access the parts of you that you are running from. So that's the second element of warriorship. So warriorship, the first element of warriorship is having the energy to go after what you know you are meant to go after. So you get that from the king. The king gives direction and the warrior gives you all right, I'm going to go do it. The second element of warriorship is the courage to witness all of the parts of yourself that stop you from taking action in the first place. So on one hand, it's like, all right, I'm going to take action. On the other hand, it's also, well, I stop myself from going to work out. Well, why do I stop myself? Maybe you feel inadequate. Maybe you feel unworthy. Maybe you feel that you're not safe if you lose weight. There could be a number of reasons. right? Maybe if you lose weight, then you got to start taking responsibility for your life. And that's terrifying. And that's the thing. The warrior archetype is actually there both as an external means, right? An external action and an internal action, meaning you're going to go within and you're going to start looking at yourself a little bit deeper, doing a little bit deeper inner work to see yourself and be like, oh man, whoo, like I do show up like in my relationship and I am, really looking to my wife to fulfill me. And I feel like if she doesn't fulfill me, then I'm not worthy, right? And it takes courage to announce that to yourself. And if she doesn't fulfill you, right, then how are you going to ever be fulfilled? How are you going to ever fulfill her? Right? You kind of see that. So you got to be able to access the warrior to witness yourself a little bit deeper. And so the warrior gives you the courage to go within, to find out what you are not, and the strength to know who you truly are. I'm going to say that in a different way. The warrior archetype gives you the strength to go find who you truly are and the courage to let go who you are not. And when you let go who you are not, meaning all the judgment and the shame and the guilt and all the blame, all of the things that stop you from being the man you want to be, that's when things start to shift for you. And so that's really where the warrior shows up. So when to access the warrior is when you know you have direction, you're going to show up, you're going to take action, and yes, I'm going to go do it. And also when you do the inner work, when you start to look at yourself and say, okay, I'm going to sit with this. Maybe you got triggered by, your wife saying something like, hey, what did you do all day? And you're like, well, that's not the time to use the shadow warrior, which I'm about to talk about, but it's the time to use the warrior to go within, to access the warrior in his fullness. So again, the warrior in his fullness shows up in the form of strength. Now, the shadow warrior, the part of us that is unconscious, will be the part that is, when triggered, will project, will be like, well, fuck you, like you're a piece of shit. And it will project it will try to protect against all of the wounding that you actually have inside. So if, for instance, you see something online and you get into the comments section and you become a keyboard warrior and you're like, well, that's not real. Like let's say you see somebody working out a certain way and you get triggered by it because your wounding is like maybe you need to start showing up as a fitness influencer online and you're like, well, this is bullshit. You don't know what you're doing. And you get online and you start commenting. Well, your warrior is coming online, but the shadow warrior is present because it's protecting you from all the pain you are feeling. And that is the reason that the warrior is there. It's there to protect. It's there to serve. But on the shadow side of it, it's not actually protecting you. It's just shielding away from actually feeling all of the pain and all the grief and the guilt that stops you from being who you truly want to be. And so in order to truly access yourself in your fullness, allow the shadow warrior to just step aside and the true warrior, the sacred warrior, the divine warrior, whatever word works best, the warrior in his fullness, to step in and have the courage to feel whatever is there. And that's where warriorship really comes in. There's a whole section of Buddhism called Shambhala, which is warriorship, which is just that. It's the courage to witness yourself and to go a little bit deeper. And so I see this a lot. In fact, there's an example of this. I posted a video recently, and I said this in the last episode as well, but I think it's really important because this is very, very telling. Most men have an idea of what masculinity is. They've kind of put it into this box and they say, well, masculinity is this. And my grandfather's grandfather was masculine. And because he, was a farmer or he was a blue collar guy and he went to war and he did this and he shot deer and he, did all these things that were masculine because he was showing up in that warrior energy. Well, again, like people from the past had their wounds. And so we see what the damage can create when a man has not gone into himself and healed himself to show up as a more full and whole human. And so then those wounds start to get passed down the line. And that shadow warrior shows up when we think that we have an idea of what masculinity truly is. But in reality, masculinity is an energy. It's sort of like the sun, right? The sun, like we have an idea of what the sun is, but we could debate all year on what the sun is. Well, it's this nuclear fusion. It's like, but do we truly know the essence of the sun? Do we truly have the science? Well, no, we don't. We have an idea of what the sun is actually doing. And we know it's like this ball of fire, right? Millions of miles away. But in reality, it's just our own personal perception of what it is from where we stand. But deep inside the core of the sun, maybe there's something happening that we have no clue about. And so why I'm bringing this forward is that I posted a video on Instagram recently, and it went completely viral. It went totally bonkers. And inside the comment section was a lot of projection and the wounding of the masculine heart. And why I say the wounding of the masculine heart, because masculinity has not portrayed itself as a present, open-hearted example for the world. So on one side, right, like we can look at masculinity and we can see like the shadow warrior of like the damage that the shadow warrior has done, and the sort of the shadow side of masculinity in general. And we say, well, that's toxic, right? And so that's where the idea of toxic masculinity came in. And I really disliked that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go find what the opposite of that. And then I, really studied masculinity. I studied, men's work and men's coaching, and really started to dive deep into that. And I was like, man, there's got to be a way in order to identify this. And then on the other side of that, it's like you got these toxic, you're toxic if you do this. If you're like really masculine, you're toxic. And on the other side of it, well, yeah, you got to be soft, but then those guys are like super afraid of like being a what they call a soy boy, a cuck, right? Like they use terms on that side where they're very, very, very protective of their own emotions. They haven't tapped into their emotions, and so they're very terrified. And so kind of on both sides, you have the shadow elements of self showing up. Now, in the center of that, the ability to remain steadfast, to have purpose, to have presence, to be open-hearted, to be emotionally intelligent, emotionally available, to have this sense of, okay, well, I know when to use emotion, I know how to guide it, but I also know how to have a backbone and take action and have structure and hold myself accountable and hold others accountable and hold others to standard, right? So like masculinity is all of these things. So masculinity in its fullness is all of those things. And so when I posted this video on Instagram, it went completely bonkers and people were freaking out, right? They were freaking out because during this experience, I was holding resistance against a man who did not access his warrior energy, and he didn't know how to access his warrior energy. And because most men claim that masculinity is warrior energy, they identified that, well, this is just a cuck camp, right? That's what they were saying. I was kind of laughing at it. They believed that what I was doing was trying to get him into masculinity, when in reality, masculinity is always there. I'm just trying to access his, or help him, guide him through the process, and just holding space for him to find out inside of himself whatever he needed. The irony of this whole thing is really interesting, is that it shows the great wounding of the masculine heart. And why that's really important is that we need to really sit with the fact that we've been protecting ourselves as men emotionally for years. Emotions are not normal for us to process, but we all have them. And it's not until we actually use the warrior energy to start to go within and start to realize, like, dude, there is something that is on my heart that's hurting, that I'm holding back, and I don't know how to process this, and I don't know how to communicate this. Like, until we start doing that, we'll continue to feel like just tight. We'll continue to feel like the world is against us. We'll continue to feel isolated. At worst, that's like when things really go awry, and you're right. That's when you end it, right? That's the worst. That's the worst case scenario. At best, right, you isolate, you continue to try to navigate and figure it out, and you just kind of beat yourself up for years and years and years, and you just don't know where to go. And so there are answers out there. That's why I do what I do. just to bring this information forward. And so the idea of masculinity is a combination of like, it is these energies, and yet within the energies of masculinity, there are shadow energies and there are energies in their fullness, or benevolent energies, if you will. And so why I bring this forward is, when I posted that online, you could see the shadow warrior come out and say, no, that's not masculinity. That's not masculinity. How could this guy do it? Oh my God, this is like, and you could see the shadow wounding and the projection. And most people felt incredibly uncomfortable because what they had to do is like access part of their own emotional state and experience. Because anytime you watch something, you're experiencing it emotionally. And when they did, they felt the wounding come forward, and then they use the projection through the shadow warrior and say, no, that's not it. Right. And so that's when shadow side comes out. So the next time you feel triggered in life, in general, like when you feel angry, when you just want to run from something, I encourage you to call upon the warrior energy, the warrior in his fullness, and ask yourself, what in me needs to be seen? What in me needs to be felt? And when you do, that's when things are going to change for you. Because when you start to feel your own wounding and your own pain emotionally, you'll release this, you'll surrender this, you'll let this go, and your life will shift in a moment because you're accessing something deep within yourself. And that's when your well starts to fill, and you can bring your energy to others, and you have energy and vitality, and you have the access within yourself to give to others. And that's when things will change for you. And so the warrior energy, again, gives us the energy, the vitality, the strength to go into life, to protect, to provide, right? To take action. It's a doing energy. It's a let's fucking go energy, right? So warrior energy is so vital. But to know the difference between the warrior, the benevolent warrior, and the shadow warrior within yourself is so important. And the shadow warrior is the unconscious parts of yourself that just kind of sitting back there, and they're trying to protect you in your wounds, in your pain. And if you let them, it will just continue to surface. You'll never actually change in life because the wounding will always be there. But if instead you use that energy to have the courage to go within your own heart and to let that go, that's when everything will change for you. Now, in order to do that, you do need to be around other warriors, other men who have done work like that. That's why I teach what I teach. That's why I do what I do. And I encourage you to go through a program. It doesn't have to be the Unbreakable Man experience, but like there are other programs out there that are supporting men in their heart to have the warrior energy, the warrior courage to look at themselves. And it's not just a softening, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to be like this soft femboy, soy boy cuck, right? Like whatever terms are being used. In fact, it's literally the exact opposite of that. Because the shadow warrior is going to teach you that says like, oh, if I do that, then I'm going to be soft and I'm going to be a pushover. I'm going to be a pussy, whatever energy, whatever word works for you there, right? But it's literally the exact opposite. In fact, it gives you the strength and the courage to show up in the face of everyone else being like, you're a piece of shit, right? When you know you have purpose and you know you have meaning, you know you have potential, and you show up no matter what somebody else says. If you want to move across the country and be an actor, right? And you go to audition after audition after audition and you're fucking tired and you're not getting callbacks and you're like, what the fuck? But you show up every day because you know you're put on this planet for that. That's that warrior energy. And you would never be able to get through that dip without having the warrior within you to step inside of yourself first and then release any pain that you have in your heart and show up as the man you know you were supposed to be. That's the whole point of this journey. Be a man, a whole man, and do something of merit for this world, and then the world will change. I firmly believe that. Firmly believe that. So that is how you access the warrior energy. Easy ways to do that, honestly. Work out, go for a run, do something, take action, have a system, be organized, right? Have rituals for yourself that like, all right, I'm going to work out this time. I'm going to do my journaling this time. I'm going to work this time. I'm going to make these sales calls. I'm going to do these things, right? That's the warrior energy. So those are easy ways. Can you do other things like jujitsu and boxing and all that? Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I encourage you. I encourage you to do those things. But you got to be able to use it as well to go within. And when you do, everything is going to shift. And so that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. How to use the warrior energy for yourself. Take action. And when you are triggered, use the warrior to have the courage to ask yourself the question, what in me do I need to feel? What in me is stopping me from taking action right now? What in me is triggered? Right? Why am I angry? What pain is underneath that? And when you feel that and you release that, whoo, life's going to change, man. I promise you this. So if you need support, genuinely, if you need support and you know you're like, dude, I'm ready to go through the Unbreakable Man experience, and go to theunbreakableman.com, like apply. Like the reason I set it up the way I do is all by design. It's ancient warrior rituals meets modern science to guide you guys through the process to create clarity and command and confrontation, all those things that just get the results you're looking for. And so now's the time, dude. Like we can't wait around anymore. Like this world is in chaos. We need heart-centered warriors. Like truly divine warriors that are ready to make change in this world, to take the division of everyone and create unity. That's what we need. We need that. And when that happens, I genuinely believe that is going to change the world. So why do I do what I do? For that. All right, guys. I really appreciate you. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next episode. Be well, stay unbreakable. I'll see you.